From the earliest childhood, everyone is taught that their existence should be subordinated to seeking approval from others. Good grades in school to make parents proud, courtesy and politeness in communication to avoid irritating those around you, choosing a stable and secure career to avoid criticism and condemnation. This way of life seems natural and correct, but in reality, it is an invisible burden that gradually deprives a person of peace and authenticity. The renowned psychologist Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will continue to direct your life, and you will call it fate." This means that a significant part of what a person considers their personality has actually been imposed on them from the outside, often without their knowledge or consent. But it's worth stopping and thinking, how many times have you had to restrain your opinion, fearing what others would think? How many opportunities have been missed due to fear of making a mistake? How many times have you felt completely exhausted trying to meet expectations that weren't even your own? And now looking back, it's worth asking yourself, did all these worries and anxieties really change anything in life? Does the criticism that was so feared in the past matter today? What was gained by trying to please everyone? The answer, as a rule, is always the same. Nothing. Only precious time, energy, and, most importantly, the connection with oneself, with who one really is, were lost. Excessive concern for the opinions of others turns into a voluntary surrender of one's happiness into the hands of others. One becomes a hostage to the changing views of those around them, constantly striving to meet ephemeral standards. The paradox of the situation is that even with impeccable behavior, there will always be a critic. The most tragic aspect of this trap is its infinity. Pleasing one group of people inevitably causes dissatisfaction in another. Satisfying one expectation creates new ones. A person transforms themselves, adapts, strives for recognition, but the efforts are futile. The truth is that people will always find a reason to comment, while most of them are more focused on themselves than on others. Realizing this fact leads to internal changes. There comes an understanding of the impossibility of pleasing everyone, and, moreover, the lack of necessity in doing so. What previously seemed vital, the thoughts of a specific person, possible statements or views, loses its significance. There is no longer a need to prove anything. Ceasing to worry about the opinions of others should not be interpreted as a manifestation of coldness or arrogance. Rather, it is the ability to prioritize, not to waste precious time on sleepless nights because of judgments that bring no benefit. It is an understanding of the value of one's own energy and the inappropriateness of wasting it on opinions that do not define a person's identity. The burden that a person carries on their shoulders is often imposed on them by other people who, in fact, do not care about their fate and only seek to suppress their will. However, only the person themselves has the power to free themselves from this oppression. At first, such a decision may seem illogical and even wrong, but as a person gets rid of other people's expectations and imposed obligations, an amazing transformation occurs. They feel long-awaited freedom. Freedom to be themselves, to make decisions without being constrained by fear, and finally to live in accordance with their beliefs and aspirations. At this moment, an important truth is realized. To achieve happiness, no one's approval is required. It is only necessary to break free from the shackles of other people's opinions. Surely everyone has encountered a situation where they tried to convince someone to accept their point of view, spending time on explanations, justifications, and demonstrations of irrefutable facts, but in the end they realized that the person remains of their own opinion. This is because it is impossible to control how other people perceive reality. And it's not just about disagreements in opinions. A person can be extremely polite, but still be misunderstood. They can show kindness and compassion, but in return, they will only receive coldness and alienation. They can make maximum efforts, but still face criticism, because each person looks at the world through the prism of their own worldview, which is not subject to any external influence. The phenomenon of illusory control makes an individual believe in the possibility of avoiding criticism, rejection, and failures through impeccable actions and words. However, the reality is that regardless of efforts, there will always be factors beyond reach. This pattern is universal. You can meticulously plan every aspect of your existence, but unforeseen circumstances are inevitable. You can put in maximum effort to maintain a relationship, but your partner may decide to leave. You can strive for universal approval, but there will always be someone who dislikes you. The stronger the desire for control, the deeper the suffering, because absolute control is a myth. Anxiety, disappointment, and exhaustion become faithful companions in attempts to hold on to what never belonged to the individual in the first place. But there is a positive aspect. Total control is not necessary to achieve happiness. Accepting the fact that some things are beyond influence greatly simplifies life. Freedom begins with giving up attempts to control the uncontrollable and focusing on the only object subject to change, oneself. From childhood, people are taught to seek approval, which is not a natural aspiration, but part of a complex social game in which it is impossible to win. From an early age, children are instilled with the need to be good boys and good girls, which in practice means following established rules, often without critical reflection. Obedience is followed by praise and love, while disobedience is followed by criticism, punishment, or expulsion. Thus, a conditional perception of love and acceptance is formed, giving rise to a deep-seated fear, the fear of not being good enough. As a person grows older, anxiety about their own inferiority only intensifies, penetrating all areas of life. The educational system persistently instills that a person's value is determined solely by high grades and academic success. The media, as if in collusion, insist on the need to conform to imposed standards of beauty in order to deserve love and recognition. The labor market, in turn, demands relentless productivity, making respect directly dependent on achievements in the professional sphere. The whole of society seems to have united in an effort to convince everyone that their significance is determined by external factors, attractiveness, material well-being, social status, and behavior that conforms to generally accepted norms. And if an individual fails to meet these often unrealistic criteria, they experience a painful sense of inadequacy. But why is this happening? The answer is simple and cynical. Human insecurity brings huge profits. When a person is convinced of their own inferiority, they become more receptive to consumption. They buy expensive clothes to fit into a certain social group, resort to cosmetic procedures in an effort to earn the approval of others, sign up for countless courses, hoping to appear smarter and more competent, and buy goods designed to impress others. The fear of being rejected and unaccepted is a powerful engine for entire industries. Ultimately, if everyone was happy with themselves and felt complete, how many of these goods and services would they really need? The system is designed so that the individual never feels completely satisfied. There will always be a new, higher standard, a new product that needs to be purchased, a new, unattainable goal to strive for. A person striving for control will never allow themselves the luxury of relaxation, because a state of rest is tantamount to losing control. But what happens if an individual dares to step out of this vicious game? What if, instead of desperately seeking confirmation of their significance in the outside world, they decide that their value does not require proof? Imagine that for the first time a person simply accepts themselves as they are, without regard to the approval of others. What will be the result? The acquisition of freedom. The ability to detach is one of the most valuable skills available to a person, as it frees them from the burden of other people's expectations. The source of suffering lies not in the events themselves, but in the meaning that is attached to them. And the main root of this suffering is excessive attachment, an obsessive need for something or someone to conform to personal ideas. However, the reality is that the stronger the attachment, the more vulnerable a person becomes. If happiness depends on the approval of others, the individual becomes a slave to the opinions of others. Attachment to the past dooms one to carry pain that should have long gone away. Dependence on a single way of feeling good creates a constant fear of losing it. Detachment should not be confused with coldness or indifference. It is the ability to love without possessing, to desire without needing, to live without depending. A person can have deep feelings for another, but their happiness should not depend solely on that person. It is permissible to have ambitious dreams, but do not destroy yourself if circumstances turn out differently than expected. It's good to be dedicated to your work, but it shouldn't be your only source of self-worth. True strength lies not in desperately clinging, but in letting go with confidence and dignity. Attachment is a cleverly disguised fear, manifesting as a dread of loss, change, and a lack of control. In contrast, detachment is genuine freedom. By learning to let go, one discovers an inexhaustible source of strength within and realizes that everything needed is already within their being. Paradoxically, the less one clings to anything, the more harmonious and natural life circumstances become. What once seemed imposed from the outside loses its relevance. Suffering gives way to ease and peace. Things that were once significant become minor details. True strength lies not in desperately holding on, but in the ability to maintain inner peace, regardless of what comes and goes in life. Imagine waking up and all your past worries and cares suddenly lose their importance. The criticism of others no longer stings, and other people's opinions are perceived as distant noise. Expectations that once bound you seem irrelevant. There is no longer a need to justify your decisions or prove anything to anyone. This freedom comes when you stop attaching excessive importance to external factors and find inner independence. At first, such a transformation may cause confusion. For many years, you built your life striving to please others, painfully reacting to any evaluations, and desperately trying to conform to accepted standards. An underlying fear of rejection constantly loomed. However, as soon as you free yourself from this oppressive burden, an amazing transformation occurs. The level of anxiety noticeably decreases, fear gradually recedes, and you experience a taste of genuine freedom for the first time. Having gotten rid of the obsessive need for approval, you begin to make decisions dictated by your true desires, not the expectations of others. You allow yourself to experiment, make mistakes, and change your beliefs without fear of criticism, realizing that other people's judgments have no power over your life. The most paradoxical thing is that by ceasing to seek approval, you, ironically, begin to command even more respect. Others unmistakably recognize the difference between someone who desperately needs validation and someone who has found harmony within themselves. Self-confidence attracts respect like a magnet. People who live according to their principles, unafraid of condemnation, exude an inner strength that involuntarily inspires others. Moreover, you gain emotional stability. What once threw you off balance loses its destructive power. Malicious comments are perceived as empty words cast to the wind. Someone's dislike does not cause despair. Life goes on. Unforeseen circumstances do not plunge you into despondency. You adapt to them without panic. Nothing has power over you anymore because you don't allow anyone to control your life. At this moment, something extraordinary happens. You experience the world in all its fullness, feeling it through the lens of your true essence. There is no longer a need to hide behind masks, be constrained by fear, or suffer from gnawing anxiety about other people's opinions. It becomes clear that the meaning of existence never lay in striving to please others, but was always directed at finding your own unique truth. And finally, the long-awaited freedom to live in accordance with this truth